Let's from Total War here, and today we're doing another top 10 Total War Warhammer video. This time doing the opposite of what we previously did and covering the top 10 worst traits to be obtained by defeating a legendary lord. Anyway, let's move now to number 10. Coming in at number 10 is Belegar Ironhammer. Defeating him will grant the trait King Hammer, which provides +4 leadership during subterranean intercept battles and +10 melee attack during subterranean intercept battles, but only for the Lord. This is a big meh, because maybe 1% of your total battles that you'll fight on the campaign will be subterranean intercept battles, and it doesn't make that big of a difference, because it only applies to your Lord. It's just a big meh. Obviously it is a bonus, but it's such a meh bonus that it might as well just provide nothing. Anyway, let's now move on to number 9. Coming in at number 9 is Karl Franz. Defeating him will provide the trait Reichs Hammer, which gives your lord the ability to cause terror, but only when fighting against the Empire. Now, many lords start off with the trait terror, and many more lords will get that trait once they obtain their top tier mount. So, it's pretty meh. And in addition to that, once the Empire has been eliminated, there's no use for this trait whatsoever. And defeating the Empire using terror is not really that effective in the first place. So it is overall a pretty meh trait, considering you took down their faction leader. And that's why it gets the number 9 slot. So moving on to number 8, it's actually just up here. Durthu. Defeating Durthu will give you the trait Tree Surgeon. And it's very much similar to Reichs Hammer, in that it just gives your lord a trait that's only good against the Wood Elves, enabling fire attacks when fighting against Wood Elves. Now, Wood Elves do have a susceptibility to fire, but keep in mind, it's only for your lord. It doesn't provide it for your entire army. So your lord has to be the one to dish out the damage. Now, in this case here, do you really think that this Night Goblin war boss, with flaming attacks, would be able to take on Durthu any differently than he did the first time? It would make the most minuscule of difference. So it is one of the most pathetic traits you can gain, especially considering how fucking strong Durthu is in the first place. It is really not worth trying to hunt it down for. Anyway, let's now move on to the number 7 slot. Coming in at number 7 is Kazrack One-Eye. Giving the trait Beast Scourge, it provides a whopping trait of causing fear. Now that's only for the Lord. So it doesn't apply to the entire army, just the Lord. Now, a lot of lords, once again, are able to cause fear once they achieve their mount. And that being said, inflicting fear is really pretty minor, considering Kazrack can be pretty hard to track down in the first place, unless you find him right at the start, as we did here. This is a pretty meh trait to get. It does at least apply to all factions, but come the late campaign, a lot of them are immune to psychology or just, quite frankly, don't give a shit. Anyway, let's now move on to number 6. Coming in at number 6 is Hellman Ghost. Defeating him will provide the trait Ghost or Ghost, and all it does is enables poison attacks, just for the Lord. Now, if it enabled poison attacks for the entire army, it wouldn't have made the list, but it only enabled it for that one Lord. Now, poison's okay, it's not that bad, but that's it. That's all it provides. Now, there are many lords that already have poison attack in the first place, so it'd be completely useless for them. And, poison's alright, but it is very meh to get for defeating a legendary lord. That's all there is to it. It's resoundingly meh. Anyway, let's now move on to the number 5 pick. Coming in at number 5 is Grom Brindell the White Dwarf. Defeating him will provide the trait Beard Hammer, which, very similar to Reichs Hammer, try to avoid the traits that end in hammer, causes terror, but only when fighting against dwarfs, and only for the lord that beats Grom Brindell. So again, it's only selectively useful, and the thing is, most dwarf units are immune to psychology, which means this wouldn't even apply to them. So anything from Longbeards up are immune to psychology, pretty much. And anything that's not immune to psychology usually has such high leadership that it doesn't even matter anyway. It is a completely useless trait, and you wouldn't even notice the effect of getting this with any of your lords against any dwarven army. It is completely useless, and that's why I got the number 5 slot. Let's now move on to number 4. Coming in at number 4 is Archaon the Everchosen. Defeating him will provide the trait Doomslayer, which gives the whopping trait immunity to psychology. Not for the entire army, just for that particular lord. Now, most lords have access to mounts which will provide fear and terror, as this lord here does. Now the thing is, if you have access to fear and terror, you can't have fear and terror applied to you. And psychology, all it does is this unit is immune to psychological attacks, fear and terror. So it is completely redundant in this case, in most cases, and pretty much in every case that you could ever possibly use it. Now, I've played many hours in Total War Warhammer, and I have maybe seen once a Lord rout due to terror. Just once. So, just in that one scenario, that one time, it could have been beneficial for me to have defeated Archaon the Everchosen, and that was in the early game. So this trait here is, you just never ever need it. It's resoundingly meh. It doesn't give you any negatives, but you just don't need it. If it applied to the entire army, then sure, that's actually pretty good. But giving it to a lord, lords have extremely high leadership in the first place, and most of them cause fear and terror. It's just redundant. Anyway, that's where it gets the number 4 slot. Let's now move on to number 3. Coming in at number 3 is Quickhead Taker. Defeating him will provide the trait Vermin Flail, which gives you a whopping bonus versus infantry plus 6. Not for the entire army, just for the lord. In some cases, as in this one here, that's less than a 1% increase to their melee damage, and again, it's only versus infantry. Now, the only lords that could make real use out of this are lords that don't have much damage output in the first place, in which case they really shouldn't be getting into melee, because they're probably spellcasters, so it doesn't really help anyone. It is a resoundingly meh trait that you will not even notice if you had it, and that's why it gets the number 3 slot. Let's now move on to number 2. Coming in at number 2 is Silostra Direfin. Defeating her will give the trait Siren Extinguished, which is one of only 2 traits obtainable by defeating legendary lords in the game that actually causes a negative effect. So it increases your miscast base chance by 5%, increases your Winds of Magic starting amount by 15, and decreases the enemy Winds of Magic by 10. Now, it's the miscast base chance that made it so high up on this list here. Like I said, it's one of only 2 traits that provides a negative. Now, the thing is, you only need to worry about that if your lord that defeats Silostra is actually a spellcaster. So in this case here, since Tyrion is not a spellcaster, it's okay. Because if he's got a caster attached to his army, they're not going to be affected by that miscast base chance, but they will receive the benefits of the Winds of Magic starting amount. But here's the thing, the Winds of Magic starting amount, that's not power reserve. All that does is use up more of your reserve for the beginning, that's it. Give you more to start off with. So basically you've got a minimum of 15 as soon as you enter any battle. That's if the random chance was 0. So that's okay, but I've never really found the starting amount that I had to be much of a problem, unless you get rolled a complete 0, and even then you can recharge at the start of the battle pretty quickly. It's just not much of an issue. Enemy Winds of Magic starting amount minus 10, again another not really issue, because the enemy very rarely utilize all their Winds of Magic anyway. Oftentimes they'll cast things in the wrong direction or just not use their magic anyway, even if they've got spellcasters. So overall, all the benefits to this are crap, and the penalty is even worse. It's a piece of shit trait, and you should be very careful about who you decide to attack and defeat Silostra Direfin with. Try to eliminate her as soon as possible, with as few lords as possible, because this trait fucking sucks. Anyway, let's move on to the number 1 trait, the worst trait from defeating a legendary lord. Coming in at number 1, it's something of an Easter egg trait. It's something that you could go through the entire campaign multiple times and never come across this particular trait. Only 2 factions in this game can even obtain it, Bordello and Carcassonne. And the way to obtain this particular trait is by defeating Luin Leoncoeur in battle. If you defeat Luin Leoncoeur, you gain the trait Traitor. So it reduces your chivalry by 50, increases your weapon strength by 20%, and increases your army upkeep cost by 10%. Now I believe because this is a negative trait and it has the the down arrow here, you can actually get rid of this trait by putting your lord in a settlement that has a shrine and essentially having them pray it away. So they can remove this trait. I believe, don't quote me on this, I think they can, because I have never naturally obtained this trait. I had to start this campaign with the sole intention of actually hitting Lewin Leoncoeur in this particular campaign. So that's the top 10 list of the worst Legendary Lord's traits. Let me know what you think. Is there some traits you think that were worse than what I mentioned? Or do you think there are the ones that I mentioned are better than what I give them credit for? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know what top 5 or top 10 video what you want me to cover next. Until then, I'll see you next time, fuckers.